Democracy is in trouble in Europe. French right-wing firebrand Marine Le Pen was on course to win the French presidency in 2027. The left-wing establishment, desperate to hold on to power and stop her, scrambled to find something to remove her from the race. They saw the Democrats prosecute Trump. They saw Turkey's leader Erdogan jail his rival. They saw the Romanian establishment bar the right-wing front-runner from standing. And they saw the German establishment criminalise the right-wing AfD. And they realised, wow, that's much easier than the traditional method of winning power in a democracy by actually doing what voters want so they vote for you. This way, by eliminating the right-wing opposition, the establishment can still carry on with all their mad open borders pro-Islamist genderqueer nonsense that voters hate, and they still get to stay in power because they're the only name left on the ballot. It's not the only way the establishment stifles democracy in Europe. They also use Cordon sanitaires to freeze parties out of power. They fix the vote and they use unofficial street militias to attack and even kill politicians. A lot of lefties are going to say, well, Marine Le Pen is too far right and she committed a crime. But by the standards of the entirety of European history, today's supposed far right are extremely liberal. Hitler would have sent the lesbian leader of the AfD and her Sri Lankan wife to the camps. Richard Lionheart had a much more robustly nativist stance than today's Reform Party. Today's socialists need to understand that maybe they're wrong and the voters are right, because that's how democracy works. Otherwise they're on a path to copy their socialist brothers of 1930s Germany. And as for the crimes of Marine Le Pen, which sounds like something you'd keep dolphins in, well, there's a grand French tradition of politicians being a bit haw with the rules. Nicolas Sarkozy, the former president, has multiple convictions for corruption and allegedly accepted millions in euros from Colonel Gaddafi for his presidential campaign. Zut alors! But far from being exiled from politics, his influence is still so strong that he can position himself as a kingmaker for the current French president Emmanuel Macron. And former French Prime Minister François Fillon was embroiled in a scandal known as Penelope Gate, involving him employing his wife Penelope in a fictitious job as a parliamentary assistant, for which she was paid without any evidence of actual work. So just like a normal government job, to be fair. He was still allowed to run as a presidential candidate, unlike Marine Le Pen, who's been barred. And former mayor of Levallois-Perret, Patrick Balkany, and his wife Isabelle were convicted of tax fraud in 2019 and sentenced to years in prison. Despite their convictions, the Balkanys remained influential in their municipality, and previously Patrick Balkany was re-elected as mayor after being convicted of misappropriation of public funds for personal gain, which sounds a lot worse than what Marine Le Pen was found guilty of. Even Ursula von der Leyen is under investigation over the dodgy allocation of billions worth of EU COVID funding, and she's allowed to be president of the whole of Europe. This sort of thing goes on all the time in France and it usually gets ignored. It's blatantly being used to take out Marine Le Pen because she's on track to win the French presidential elections in 2027. They didn't even wait for an appeal. Prosecutors in Le Pen's case got the judges to ban her from running for office for 5 years immediately, even if she were to appeal, as opposed to waiting until all appeals have been concluded. Typically in France, punishments are not levied until all appeals have been exhausted, as the presumption of innocence continues to apply, and this process can take years. But no wonder the left-wing establishment is in a panic. There was a huge upset in the last French parliamentary elections, with the country turning to the right, as French citizens, like all Western citizens, are just getting tired of endless mass immigration, Islamist attacks, unsustainable socialist economics, net zero, and a civilization in decline. Marine Le Pen's party, National Rally, were expected to win in the parliamentary elections, and in one way they did. They got by far the biggest share of the total vote, with over 37%. But somehow, when the votes were tallied, they came third, and the French Socialist Alliance, the Nouveau Front Populaire, won the most seats, despite getting just over 25% of the votes. Man, that party is French and socialist? I'm just trying to compute how much laziness is in that sentence. And here's the Socialist Rally. There's more Palestinian flags than French ones. I'm going to explain why the French socialists are horrific, even for socialists, in a moment. But first, what happened? How could the French right wing win the most votes but still come in third behind a party that won far fewer votes? Well, the French elections are a rather elaborate two-stage process. There's a first round, and then the most unpopular candidates are eliminated, and the ones who got the most votes go through to the second round. What this means is that parties can see how everyone does in the first round and can then barter with each other to fix the result of the next round. So if Le Pen's candidate is out in front in one seat with 40% of the vote, while Macron and Melenchon's candidates both have 21%, Macron's candidate can agree to drop out and endorse Melenchon's candidate so that their votes are pooled to keep Le Pen's candidate from winning the seat. Imagine watching the high jump in the Olympics and the bronze medalist lets the silver medalist get on his shoulders to get extra height and win the game. It's like that but with French people. France's left-wing parties and Mr. Macron's centrist coalition did just that, colluding to pull out over 200 candidates from three-way races in districts where Le Pen's party had a chance of clinching a seat, such as the hysteria around the supposed far right that people would vote for whoever was opposing it. It's weird to see centrists vote for communists and Marxists vote for pro-capitalism candidates. This is a fix. When we talk about elections being stolen in the West, we don't mean the ballot stuffing or fraud that lets Zimbabwean leaders romp home with 126% of the vote. We mean things like this and the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was a totally valid story revealing scandalous things about Biden's son, who lived a life of deeply illegal debauchery while trading on his family name. It would have had a huge impact on the 2020 US election, but the Democratic Party colluded with social media companies, the FBI and news outlets, so the whole left-wing establishment, to label it as fake news, remove it from view and punish anyone who shared it. It was a classic right-wing conspiracy theory that came true, and it had a big influence on a knife-edge election. Or when we talk about elections being stolen, we mean disparate political parties colluding to keep one party out like they did in France, or giving votes to non-natives who will vote the preferred left-wing way, or unfairly holding one party to different standards than the others like with Marine Le Pen, or threatening voters with violence if they deliver the wrong result, all of which happen across Europe and all of which denies the democratically expressed will of the people. And even with the seats they managed to get in Parliament, Le Pen's party is frozen out of decision making. Other parties form a Cordon sanitaire. They see stopping any right-wing influence as the utmost priority, so all the other parties work together to freeze out the right-wing from the decision-making process. This is totally anti-democratic. France is currently the most right-wing it's been since probably the Second World War, and it's having another super woke left-wing government shoved on it anyway. It's weird that the establishment sides with the far left to keep the right from power. The far left in France are absolutely insane. Jean-Luc Melenchon, a key leader in the socialist bloc that ended up with the most seats, is nuts. He hates the EU, NATO, America and the West. He's frequently accused of anti-Semitism. Instead of a military alliance with America, he wants an alliance with Russia and Venezuela. He stayed a fan of socialist Latin American dictators Chavez and Maduro long after the student idealism romance rubbed off and left-wing paramilitary squads started executing protesters and starvation forced people to eat out of their bins and flee the country. In Venezuela, things are now so bad that people are eating their pets to survive and zookeepers can't feed the zoo animals, so they've been feeding some zoo animals to other zoo animals. I'm just telling you because I know people love animals more than actual humans, so maybe you'll wake up to the horrors of socialism if I show you a picture of a hungry giraffe having to eat a wombat. Although, if the French do end up having to eat their pets, at least they've already got the delicious recipes for it. Melenchon has also declined to call Hamas a terror group. He's pledged to reduce the retirement age, which is already low in France. At the moment, the French can stop work at about 32, and they don't work very hard before that. He's also going to drastically increase the minimum wage, and he wants to introduce price controls. These are the economic policies of a cannabis-infused sixth form common room. One of his politicians is Raphael Arnault, an Antifa leader on a French security watch list who's been accused of defending the October 7th Hamas terror attacks and violently attacking a right-wing activist. He's now elected to the French Parliament. Great. And these are the people the mainstream are turning to in panic to form a cordon sanitaire to stop the far right from getting in. If other right-wing leaders like Giorgia Meloni in Italy have shown anything, it's that the so-called far right become pretty sensible centrists when they get into power. A bit too sensible and too centrist in my opinion. And the French far left are horrific. Macron should be forming an alliance with Le Pen to keep the socialists out. And using lawfare to put opposition politicians in jail is just one way the left tried to stamp out the opposition across Europe. The other way is by literally stamping on the opposition, as well as the implicit threat of rioting that persuades voters to vote one way. Across the West, the left used the threat of police or the left's unofficial street militias to intimidate and assault right-wing politicians. NatCon, the Conference for European Conservatives, was shut down by Brussels police, but under leftist regimes, the state doesn't have the monopoly on violence. There's also a network of Islamist and leftist groups such as Antifa, which are tacitly tolerated by the establishment as they do their dirty work for them. Last year, right-wing Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico survived an assassination attempt. Upon recovering recovering, Fico accused opposition parties and the media of conspiring against him, alleging involvement by billionaire George Soros. In 2023, an Antifa activist smashed his car into anti-immigration protesters in Dublin. The same year, AfD co-leader Alice Weidel was forced to flee her home after German intelligence warned of an impending assassination attempt. And last year, another AfD politician was attacked in the German city of Mannheim, just 5 days after the fatal stabbing of a police officer in its market square during a rampage by an Islamist at a political rally. The Dutch right-wing leader Thierry Baudet was attacked with an umbrella and then again in another incident by a man wielding a glass bottle. The founder of Spain's right-wing Vox party was shot in the face at point-blank range. And of course, if you go back further, there's the horrific murder of Dutch politician Pim Fortuyn by a left-wing activist. We keep being told of the threat of far-right extremism, but the reality is that the streets of Europe have become unsafe for right-wing activists due to leftist violence, and with the left arresting opposition politicians, and Marine Le Pen was the #1 candidate for the French presidency, remember, things look very bad for democracy. I wonder if left-wing people ever look at themselves doing this stuff and think, stifling democracy, jailing political opponents, ignoring the will of the people. Wait a minute, are we the bad guys? Things are pretty bad when Vladimir Putin can take the moral high ground. And will this stifling of democracy even work? Will European voters be like, well, I guess we better not vote for who we wanted then, we better vote for who we're told to vote for? That's not how it's playing out. Support for the AfD, who've been criminalised and harassed by the establishment, carries on surging. It's currently at 24%. They're almost the biggest party in Germany. When it comes to Cordon sanitaires, Le Pen is mightier than Decor. I do apologise. And France doesn't exactly have a history of citizens bending to the will of arrogant elites. Will they be sharpening their guillotine blades? Even if a judge has found Marine Le Pen guilty, why not let her run? There's no better jury than the entire population. Although from a selfish point of view, it might be good for Britain if France does go to the left. The UK is pretty much the only country in Europe still welcoming with open arms and travelodge rooms any 60 IQ Janjaweed militants who can rip up their passports and get on something that floats. At least a French far-left government that gives illegal immigrants a cuddle and lots of benefits isn't going to send migrants to the UK. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you want to support me making these videos and get access to exclusive content and live streams, you can become a patron. There's a link below. Check it out.